Welcome to this presentation about the astrology of the coronavirus. What I'm going to do is go over the Vedic astrology chart of the coronavirus and take a quick peek at the chart of the United States as well. And then I'm going to offer some insights. This is basically my own interpretation of the chart. Some of this is coming from a Vedic perspective, and quite a bit of it is also coming from a Buddhist perspective. So I'm kind of showing you what I'm seeing in these charts, and then I'm going to go over remedies. Some of these are on the spiritual side, and some are very practical and have to do with the very practical, sort of most up-to-date information about things you can do in terms of hygiene and supplements and things like that. So we'll do all of it, and my intention here is to offer insight, to offer information, but most of all to offer some kind of peace of mind, because as you'll see in the chart, there's a lot of fear and anxiety, which the whole world is really feeling over this, and you can see it very clearly in the Vedic chart. And my intention here is to help everyone to access their own resources for serenity and gratitude and health and all that good stuff. So first I wanted to talk about what is a virus actually. A virus is a really interesting entity because it's not alive and it's not alive. It's basically a piece of information, which is a nucleic acid molecule that is surrounded by a protein coat. So I read a whole article today on, how you can figure out whether a virus is alive or not. And by most definitions of what a living thing is, a virus isn't alive. But on the other hand, it is a piece of information. And this is actually the dictionary definition. An infective agent that typically consists of a nucleic acid molecule in a protein coat, too small to be seen by light microscopy, and is able to multiply only within the living cells of a host. So you can see it has a kind of parasitic aspect as well. And I put the word information in there because I looked up what a nucleic acid molecule does. Of course, a nucleic acid is DNA and RNA, and they are what give our cells the information that tells them what to do. So this is basically a piece of information that can only live when it's inside something else. So some of the other definitions of a virus are a harmful or corrupting influence, and also, of course, how we use it in terms of technical stuff, a piece of code which is capable of copying itself and typically has a detrimental effect. So this is the kind of viruses your computer gets. So you can see the similarity between a virus that infects animals and humans and a virus that infects a computer. Now, of course, the virus that we're all talking about these days is a coronavirus, which is a family of very common viruses that cause common cold, but have also caused some more serious diseases such as SARS and MERS. So, basically viruses can change their form in different ways, and when they have these kinds of mutations, they may do different things once they get into our own cells. So that's what a virus is. And I think it's an interesting piece of information, kind of relates to the astrology of this whole thing. So next question is, how do you get an astrology chart for the virus? And so basically I was attending a webinar with one of my teachers, an excellent Vedic astrologer named James Kelleher. He lives in Nevada City. He's been practicing for decades. The really cool thing about James is that he had a real genuine, spiritually realized Indian guru who taught him astrology. He actually had two of them. And one of them insisted that he do this form of astrology, which I'm going to be showing you here, which is called mundane astrology. Mundane astrology is the astrology of things that are not alive, are not living, like a country. Like I'm going to be showing you the chart of the United States. So you can do, you can do a chart for the stock market. You can do a chart for a country. You can do a chart for any kind of entity, even if it's not alive on its own, as long as you have a date of its birth or a date of its emergence. And James is an expert in this because he was encouraged decades ago by one of his gurus to go into this field of astrology, which is a bit risky because you're doing things and making predictions based on a large amount of people. So he every year looks at China and Germany and Australia, and he predicts things, everything from earthquakes to economic stuff to diseases, etc. And when he wanted to stop a while back, his guru told him, no, this is a service that you need to perform for others. So anyway, just to let you know that I really trust him. And that's why I go and I watch his presentations every time, because I find it gives me a lot of insight. And I have my own kind of interpretations of some of what he presents, which includes what I'm going to be talking about today. So anyway, he presented the chart of the coronavirus. And the information that he used was January 1st, 2020 at midnight. So in other words, this is the start of the new year in Wuhan, China. So that is the chart. If you want to make the chart yourself, and I'm going to show it to you in just a minute, this is how he made the chart, the Vedic astrological chart. And after I looked at the chart and saw how incredibly accurate it seemed and how much information was there, I actually contacted him and I said, James, how confident are you in this chart? And is this a traditional thing that you kind of just set it at New Year's Day? And he said, well, this is really the beginning of the year, like for the whole world. And it is true that it's kind of like, even though this was happening in China before the new year, it's really this year that is kind of coming to the front. So he felt that this was a very legitimate chart, and that what it was showing was very accurate, and I agree with him on that, and that this was a legitimate way to make a chart for a virus. So of course, this is not something you can look up in the old textbooks of Vedic astrology, because obviously viruses were not a known entity at that time, but this is a way that he is adapting. And he also said, some astrologers are really stuck in just using the traditional techniques, but that he feels that astrology should always adapt. And his ways of doing things are always very strongly based on traditional principles, but he kind of takes them to another level in a certain way. So that's where I got this chart for the virus. It's thanks to James Kelleher, and I do encourage you, if you want to look more at world events in general every year, go to his website, jameskelleher.com, and you can purchase, even now you can purchase, his predictions for 2020. So here is the Vedic chart for the virus. The first thing, I'm going to be talking about the planets from the point of view of the signs that they're in, the houses that they're in, but also a unique way that we have for analyzing charts in Vedic astrology is the lunar mansions. Now, lunar mansions, of course, were better known to in medieval astrology, but in Vedic astrology, they've always been very, very important. So the first thing that we notice is that the ascendant is in the sign of Virgo, which is, of course, a sign of healing, but also a sign that can represent, sickness and disease. It's the natural sign of the sixth house, which is a house of disease or a house of enemies or a house of infectious agents. Then we see that the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, and Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius, which is a good sign because it represents righteousness and justice and things like that. It's in the fourth house, which is a house of healing and a house of the home. And it is in the lunar mansion of Mula. And Mula means the root. And it's the lunar mansion that is located where the galactic center is, and it is ruled by Niriti, who is a female deity that is very wrathful, and it gives the power or the Shakti of destruction. So it can have to do with kind of dark subconscious stuff coming out of what I think of as almost like a crack in the universe, sort of like the dark forces or the negative forces sort of emerging and causing a kind of destruction. Now, of course, destruction is very connected with healing, because sometimes old stuff needs to fall apart in order for the new impulses to come forward. So this energy of things kind of falling apart, almost like the Tower card in the Tarot, this energy of things falling apart is very much where what Mula is about. But that falling apart can often lead to something that comes up that's much better. And in fact, Jupiter is there, Mercury was there in that lunar mansion with Jupiter. And Jupiter represents wisdom and knowledge, and it's in its own sign of Sagittarius. Ketu is there, which Ketu is the south node of the moon, which represents kind of letting go of stuff, shedding stuff. So it's kind of a busy house, because as you can see, Pluto was there at the same time. If you're familiar with these glyphs, Saturn was there in that house, which represents illness and the sun. So it's a very loaded house. There are actually 6 planets there. So lots of influences going on around this event of this virus emerging. And some of it does have to do with this kind of subconscious or dark side material being ready to be expressed. Now, another thing I want to point out is that Rahu, which is the north node of the moon, is in the 10th house. And by the way, when Rahu is in Gemini, which is the sign that it was in, it's in its sign of exaltation. It's where Rahu is very strong. So Rahu is in the 10th house, which is the top of the zodiac, and kind of dominating things in a certain way. And Rahu is in a lunar mansion called Ardra, which is represented by a teardrop. And it is related to a form of Shiva called Rudra, which is has to do with howling and storms. And basically, if you see this in the chart of a person, it can represent somebody who's undergone a lot of suffering and perhaps has been able to really develop their powers of compassion based on the suffering that they've seen. And so this lunar mansion does bring suffering. And this Rahu also represents, I would say, viruses. It's obviously sort of a glyph for viruses, and because it represents things that are kind of unknown or unseen or hard to explain. It also represents poisons, because Rahu is basically the head of a snake or a serpent, and represents that head, that bottomless pit, always craving more, always wanting more. Rahu can bring shocks, disappointments, things not being the way they seem. And there has been a lot of kind of Rahuian stuff going on, at least in the homeopathic community around this virus, and I'll explain a little bit more in a moment. So that's a little bit about Rahu in this lunar mansion of Ardra and being really strong in the sign of Gemini. Then I next want to just look at the moon. And by the way, the lunar mansion that Rahu is in is also ruled by Rahu, so that makes it even stronger. Now, the moon is what's really crucial in this particular chart. And because the moon is in the 6th house, which is a house of disease or enemies. It's also in a sign of that's owned by Rahu, which is Aquarius. So it's got that strong influence. And it's even more importantly, it's in a lunar mansion ruled by Rahu, which is called Shatabishak. And Shatabishak is represented by a 1,000-petaled lotus, which also represents 1,000 physicians, and also represents an empty circle. And I think all of those have something very strong to say about what's going on right now. 1,000 physicians has to do with using alternative methods of healing or going to different healers, lots of different healers to try to get it fixed, but having a hard time getting anywhere with it. And the thing that's going on with the moon, besides that it's down in the 6th house, which is the suffering house and the house of disease, and this lunar mansion of Shatabishak, it, by the way, gives the power of healing. But the moon is actually being afflicted by all 3 of the malefic planets. It's getting the aspect of Mars, which can represent inflammation, things like that. It's getting the aspect of Saturn, which represents disease and healing, and even more, disease and sickness and old people and things like that. But more importantly, it's getting the aspect of Rahu from the 10th house, which does represent this kind of poison or things that are hard to detect, things that are hard to diagnose, deceptions happening, that kind of thing. So the moon is under a lot of affliction here. So that is a really important point, and the point that I'm going to go through a little more. Now, another thing I'm going to explain to you about is a system of dashas, or planetary periods. And basically what happened, this is the planetary periods down on the lower left here that I'm circling. When this virus was born, so to speak, it was in the major period of Rahu. So the karmas that all have to do with Rahu, things being difficult to diagnose, poisons, that kind of stuff, viruses, and it was a sub-period of the sun, which wasn't quite so bad because this, the sun is in a sign of, is in a fire sign of Sagittarius. That wasn't so bad. But what happened was on January 31st, 2020, we went into a sub-period. We're still in the major period of Rahu, but we went into the sub-period of the moon. And the moon is the planet that is under so much affliction in this chart. That looks like it's going to be a challenging time for this virus. So that sub-period lasts until August 1st of 2021, when we go from Rahu moon to Rahu Mars. And Mars is one of the planets that's afflicting the moon. So that again doesn't look, and it's the sign of Scorpio, which is a sign of disease as well. So it's not looking like things are going to get better really fast with this. On 8/20/2020, on 8/20/2022, it will go into the period of Jupiter, and that should be somewhat better. So, you know, we may be dealing with this virus for a while. And the affliction that is really going on here is the affliction of the moon with Rahu. And the moon represents our minds. One of the things I've been in contact with James about this chart, because after I looked at it, I really wanted to hear from him about, as I said, the accuracy of the chart and everything. And one of the things he said about it was, if this was the chart of a person, this would be a person who probably had a lot of sickness, but also had a lot of fear. Because, you know, that moon by itself having all these afflictions from these wrathful planets can cause a lot of fear. And that is something that's going on. So I think we have two levels, or many levels, and I'm going to try to address as many of them as possible. We have the level of contamination and being kind of off balance, the way the whole planet has been. We have the level of the actual virus and disease itself and what we need to do about it. And we also have the level of our mental, emotional, spiritual state and how to approach this kind of event in a way that can bring us to a better place in general, both as a society, as a human race, and also individually. So interestingly, this is the chart of the United States. And interestingly, if we look at this, we can see that the ascendant of the United States is also in the lunar mansion of Mula, which has to do with the root and has to do with stuff kind of coming out. It's where, so basically, this Mercury in the chart of the virus was right on the ascendant of the US. So you can see that it could very strongly affect the United States. And interestingly, the moon in the US chart is in the lunar mansion of Shatabishak, which is what it is in the virus chart. So there's a strong correlation. I'm sorry the planets aren't showing up right here. Sometimes that happens when I paste things in from my astrology. But anyway, the moon is over here in Shatabishak, same place that the moon is in the virus chart. And Mercury, the lord of the ascendant in the virus chart, was on the ascendant of the US. And then we also have planets in Ardra, the lunar mansion that represents a teardrop, which was happening over here in the 7th house, which is the house of others, or other countries that we, in terms of a chart of a country, this would be other countries that we're dealing with that are in the lunar mansion of Ardra. So there's a lot of connections between the virus chart and the US chart. So when we look at that, we would say there's a lot of karmic connections going on here. But probably the most important karmic connection is that on October 3rd of 2015, we went into a major period of Rahu in the United States. That means that there's karma around Rahu, karma around this kind of energy of unstoppable greed, because Rahu represents just constant craving, always wanting something else, always kind of expanding, and also represents, as I said, viruses or things that are unseen, hard to detect, hard to diagnose, things that are poisonous or have to do with sort of unclean or defiled, that kind of thing. So the the coronavirus actually started in a really interesting place, as you may have heard, what is called a wet market. And what this is about is they slaughter the animals immediately, and people want to buy the meat while the flesh is still warm. So, you know, in the old days, this was probably a health thing because there wasn't good refrigeration. But these days, it's something that's very popular. And I was reading some articles about wet markets, and they were saying, you know, we're selling the same meats in the grocery stores, slaughtered at the same time as in these wet markets, but everybody flocks to these wet markets. And not only are there the carcasses of freshly slaughtered, still warm animals hanging there, there are live animals being sold that people take home to butcher themselves. So it's kind of a shocking place if you're not used to this kind of thing. Um, and one could see how something strange could arise in such an environment. So I wanted to talk about the moon and the mother because, as I said, this chart really shows that the moon is deeply afflicted. And well, what does that mean? You know, it has to do with Mother Earth, um, our sense of compassion, our sense of healing, nurturing, and most of all, the moon represents beings. When you look at the charts of these mundane charts that are of entities, such as a virus or a country, the moon represents the people or the living beings within. So it's showing, you know, the affliction to the Mother Earth, to the sentient beings there, um, to the sense of compassion. And so in Vedic astrology, we're always talking about upayas or remedial measures. And so what we want to be able to do, since this moon is afflicted, what is the remedy? The remedy is to strengthen the moon. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about now are all remedial measures that we can all do to strengthen the moon for ourselves internally, but also just strengthen it externally as well. So the moon, as I said, is compassion. It's got different traits. When it's a full moon, it's more benefic. When it's dark, it can be very connected with the vata or the wind element and lead to some kinds of anxieties. And of course, in this chart of the virus, the moon is in a wind sign, an air sign of Aquarius, and it's being aspected also by Rahu, which is ultra wind and is basically in a wind sign as well, or an air sign. So that air energy, when it's affecting the moon, brings this sense of anxiety and unsettledness and restlessness. So we want to kind of help to balance that. Pearls are associated with the moon. The metal, the silver is the metal. The blood, the lymph, stomach, fertility are all associated with the moon, as is nutrition in general. So nutrition can be very important in terms of this situation. Milk and dairy are considered to be moon products, and any kind of healing plants or herbs. So here's some other general kinds of recommendations for the moon. The native should be very caring and compassionate. The moon is the natural mother, and the home of such people is a manifestation of the inner self. So this is interesting because we may be going into periods of what is called social isolation, where we need to be spending more time at home. And so this spending more time at home may be a great thing for the moon. If anybody's, please mute yourself if you have your microphone on. That would help the quality for everybody. Thank you. Disorder at home or disturbed home tends to disturb them even more, using a lot of glass and crystal in the interiors. is good, a sign of good luck. All artifacts that shine and glitter like the moon are reflecting the light of the sun are a source of joy. Music, especially ballads or sentimental music, melodies where the lyrics are important messages for our thirsty minds. So singing, humming some songs, these are all some ways to kind of nurture the moon. Um, Especially, as I said, singing, voice is very much connected with the moon. Caring for mother or mother figures, so people in your life who are older women, and nurturing them, caring for them, cooking for them, bringing them food, bringing them herbs. These are all moon remedies. And of course, staying at home, as I mentioned. And also knowing what it is that you need to nurture, how you handle boundaries, and knowing when to give and when to hold back, because people who are associated with the moon sometimes give too much and then go into that, a windy, burnt out state. So these are just some ideas, and it's associated with the bhakti path, or the path of devotion. Pearls, as I mentioned earlier, are associated with the moon. High quality pearls are available through Vedic astrology gemstone places such as astrologicalgem.com. But even just wearing, I always wear a pearl mala. It's not a high quality pearl, but it is pearls. And that is a way to strengthen moon energy. And if you do start wearing pearls, and you can start wearing them on a Monday and use the Tara mantra that we're going to be going into soon. Because Monday is Moon Day. It's the day of the moon. So that is when the moon energy is strong, especially right at sunrise on Monday. Tara is the deity associated with the moon. She's considered to be the mother of the Buddhas, and she's also considered to be the activity of all the Buddhas. So when something actually needs to be done, Tara is the one who does it. And of course, there are 21 forms of Tara, and they all have different kinds of activities based on what needs to be done. Some have to do with healing, some have to do with magnetizing, some have to do with suppressing, when the mother needs to just put her foot down and do something kind of suppressive and wrathful. And some are enriching. Those are the four main kinds. And Tara is the deity who is said to free us from fear, because she is swift, she is heroic, and she frees us from fear. So by praying to Tara, by chanting her mantra, we can free ourselves from fear. We can develop our own hearts of compassion. A very beautiful prayer from the Buddhist tradition is this Arya Tara, you are all-knowing, grant protection from all forms of fear and suffering. Arya Tara, you are all-knowing, grant protection from all forms of fear and suffering. Arya Tara, you are all-knowing, grant protection from all forms of fear and suffering. So instead of getting afraid, we can pray to Tara, and we can connect with Tara, and we can recognize our own nature as Tara. And these can all be ways that we can approach what's going on with this epidemic and the kinds of changes that are happening in the world based on it. So Tara's mantra is Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. Om invokes auspiciousness, peace, and balance. Tare is her name. It's got because of the Sanskrit grammar, the A changes to an E. Swift and heroic liberator, liberates us from fears, troubles, and samsara. Tutare means her powerful activity of fulfilling all wishes brings us to nirvana. Ture, we move beyond both samsara and nirvana to the non-dual state of the Dharmakaya, and Soha establishes us in the state of complete enlightenment, firmly like a driven stake. So the liberation of fear is very important in this mantra. So I'm going to sing it a few times. And if you know it, you're welcome to sing with me. Om Tare Tu Re Swaha. 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 So that explanation of the mantra comes from a book called Tara's Enlightened Activity by the Kempo brothers. Mantra is very, very powerful if you choose to bring it into your life. This is the picture of a blind beggar in Bhutan who, through the power of the Vajraguru mantra, had amazing abilities to heal others, had visions of Guru Padmasambhava, and basically became a realized saint just by chanting the Vajraguru mantra over and over again. And the Tara mantra is also extremely powerful. One of my teachers, a woman teacher, whose father was a tertin or a treasure revealer, just yesterday was doing some life release, releasing fish into the river in Calcutta, and she reminded everybody that the mantra that can really make a change here is Tara mantra, and she recommended doing 1,000,000 Tara mantras. Another thing that we can do is cultivate bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is compassion. But it's kind of a very high level of compassion, compassion that involves the union of wisdom and emptiness. So what we normally think of as compassion or feeling sorry for others sometimes is more of a top-down, controlling kind of approach, where we're trying to do something and do what's best for some other being, but we may not be right about what it is. It may just be our idea of what that other being needs. Whereas bodhicitta is a much more open and free and lacking clinging kind of compassion. And it is combined, it's wisdom and emptiness combined on the ultimate level. So we're going to talk a little bit about the cultivation of compassion, again, because this is a remedy for the moon, and therefore a remedy for what we are finding ourselves in now in terms of the coronavirus. So I'm going to, if you want to say these together with me, this is a way of cultivating the aspiration of bodhicitta, or the aspiration of compassion. And there are whole training programs in Buddhism about how to cultivate compassion. And in fact, I'm teaching all these things in the Death Doula program, which just started. But the beginning is the bodhicitta, or the compassion of aspiration. So the first thing we need to do is aspire. So if you want to say these with me. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that has no suffering. May all sentient beings live in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So we can send out that wish that all sentient beings be free from all suffering from this virus and all the ways that sentient beings suffer. May they all be free from that suffering. We can also take the vow of a bodhisattva. And by the way, if you're watching this live, this is really auspicious because today is a very special holiday in the Buddhist tradition. It's the first full moon of the Tibetan New Year. And so anything we do that's positive or negative multiplies something like 5 million times. So if you want to take this vow with me, we can take it together and say this maybe 3 times, and it's very, very auspicious day to do it. Sentient beings are countless. I vow to deliver them all. Afflictions are endless. I vow to eradicate them all. Dharma means are immeasurable. I vow to learn them all. Buddha Bodhi is unsurpassed. I vow to attain it. And we'll say it 2 more times. Sentient beings are countless. I vow to deliver them all. Afflictions are endless. I vow to eradicate them all. Dharma means are immeasurable. I vow to learn them all. Buddha Bodhi is unsurpassed. I vow to attain it. Sentient beings are countless. I vow to deliver them all. Afflictions are endless. I vow to eradicate them all. Dharma means are immeasurable. I vow to learn them all. Buddha Bodhi is unsurpassed. I vow to attain it. And another technique from the Buddhist tradition for the cultivation of bodhicitta is tonglen, or sending and receiving. And this, I feel, is exceptionally powerful for the times that we are in today, and especially if you are feeling anxiety about what's going on in the world, or anxiety for your health, or anxiety for anybody else's health. So the way that this goes, it's called sending and receiving. So we start by imagining in front of us somebody that we really care about, and that person is suffering and having a hard time. And so first we imagine on the sending part, on the out breath, as we send our breath out, we offer them everything that they need, whether it's medicine, healing, peace, serenity, whatever it is they need, we send it to them on the out breath. And on the in breath, we take in all of their pain and suffering, confusion, whatever it is. So we'll try a few breaths of that first. On the out breath, sending all the resources, all the love, all the compassion. On the in breath, taking in all the pain, all the suffering, all the disease. And then out, sending them everything they need, and in, taking in whatever it is that is a problem for them. And out again, sending them what they need, and in, taking in all of their afflictions. And now we're going to expand it to not just that one being that we have a lot of compassion and feeling for. We're going to expand it to those that we feel neutral toward. And we're going to send all those beings what they need, and bringing in all of their pain, sending out what they need, bringing in all of their suffering, sending out on the exhale what they need, bringing in on the inhale all their suffering. And now expanding to even those who we might consider enemies, or the one people who upset us. Could be political figures, could be somebody we don't get along with. But imagine that all of those beings, whether you love them, feel neutral to them, or you are repulsed by them, you do it for everybody. In fact, do it for the whole world. Breathing in, taking in all the suffering. Breathing out, offering the love and compassion. Breathing in, taking in the suffering. Breathing out, love and compassion. Breathing in, taking in the suffering, and breathing out, love and compassion. And then After you've done this for a while, you can just rest in a state of non-dual nature of the mind. So that's the practice. I'm kind of going through things a little bit fast because there's a lot to do, but this is a very powerful practice. I'm also a homeopath, as you may know, and this is kind of the homeopathy of Buddhist compassion practices, because you're basically making a medicine out of emptiness, and you're also making a medicine out of the disease itself. And in fact, I mentioned earlier that the moon is in that lunar mansion of Shatabishak, which is the empty circle. And that has to do with that non-dual state, which is the natural state of our mind when it rests in wisdom awareness. So this practice can help you to achieve a state of being able to see the natural state of your mind, which is beyond coming and going, or friends and enemies, or self or an other. Another wonderful practice from the Buddhist tradition, which is very much indicated by this virus, is the practice of life release, the saving of lives. There's a wonderful organization or a group of practitioners in Alameda, California. Every year they raise money to release goats who are at the auction going to be slaughtered for meat, and instead they buy these goats and spend many thousands of dollars, probably upwards of $40,000 on goats, and then they bring the goats to some people called Goats Are Us, who keep the goats, and the goats become brush eaters and prevent fires in California. So it's kind of a win-win situation where these goats that are about to die instead have a new life and a job clearing brush. So it's a really wonderful, wonderful idea. And here's on the right one of my teachers, Sanyum Kamala, that I was mentioning earlier. And she's in Calcutta. This picture was just taken in Calcutta the other day, where she is releasing the lives of millions of fish into the Ganges River. So that's another way to do it. On the left is showing a monk who's blessing some cows that are also being released. But you can actually do it at home very easily. What I do, there's actually a bait shop on my way home. So what I do is I stop and buy worms at the bait shop, and I release them into my garden. And as you release them, you can say the Tara mantra, or you can say Om Mani Padme Hum, or you can just pray that you're dedicating this release of these animals that were doomed to die to the health and happiness of all beings. So life release is another very, very powerful practice for generating compassion, and also for longevity. You can dedicate it to the longevity of all beings, or if you know someone who's sick, you can dedicate it to their longevity. But this is a very powerful practice, and one that's easy to do. Then I was going to talk a little bit about some alchemical elixirs that can help for achieving peace of mind. This one, Snow Lotus, was made specifically in tune with the Tara mantra. It's a very beautiful flower that grows up in the Himalayas. And it's got a very nice sort of dynamic but peaceful energy. I sell these elixirs on an Etsy site called Shakti Herbal Alchemy, and all of the proceeds for it go to my teacher's temple in Tibet. So it's just a fundraiser for me. But anyway, it's very beautiful, interesting flower, and has a nice, peaceful but dynamic energy like Tara. And then lotus, I also have another elixir that's made from lotus petals, which again gives a kind of moon-like serene energy, and has been found to be very effective for release of anxiety and a sense of groundedness and a sense of serenity. So we might want to also, one of the things that's happening is we are sometimes maybe facing what's called social isolation. A lot of events are being canceled, school classes are being canceled. And so we kind of need to be comfortable in our home space and comfortable in our own mind. And this is having a really interesting effect. One of my teachers, Kensei Rinpoche, has many, many Chinese students, and a lot of them were really freaking out because they had quite a long, home quarantine. People were just not allowed to go out, and it was very, very hard. But it can be a wonderful opportunity for rest, retreats, meditations on compassion, such as the ones I'm suggesting here, chanting mantra, and also letting the earth heal from not polluting it so much with all the running around we do. So this is, with this moon, this afflicted moon that we've been talking about, could be an ideal time to let the world rest and heal and come into balance with all of the climate crisis and pollution and craziness going on. Maybe we could actually reframe what's going on and say, yeah, maybe we all need to take a little break and slow down a little bit and just focus on our inner life, on our own personal healing, on cultivating compassion and serenity, and let this be a transformation that is very healing. The other thing that we can think about, because of course a lot of fear and anxiety has to do with death. And actually, the one thing that is for sure when we are born is that we are going to die. So being one of the most powerful practices for spiritual maturity is to really contemplate death and contemplate the nature of death and contemplate the fact that we are going to die and that everything that is around us is impermanent. In fact, in the Buddhist tradition, the moment of death is considered to be the greatest opportunity for spiritual liberation. So instead of having a lot of fear and anxiety, to really go into that place and do practices, meditate on compassion, and be ready for what's inevitable, which is death. Here's a map put out by NASA showing what happened when people had to go into self-quarantine, and look how much cleaner it is. So this is already working in China. The fact that people went into quarantine and couldn't be out on the roads, and so the pollution went away. The earth became cleaner. So we have to consider this side of what's going on as well as a way of allowing the earth to heal. Another suggestion I'm going to make is I'm not vegetarian. I aspire to being a vegetarian, but I'm not. I haven't found a way to do it and stay healthy. But an offering, a compassion offering that we can make is meatless Mondays. Monday, as I said, is the day of the moon. So if we can aspire to or avoid eating meat on a Monday and dedicate it to the well-being of all sentient beings. Traditionally, in the Buddhist tradition, often new moon and full moon, because again, this association with the moon. The moon is about compassion and the mother, who of course would not go around eating her children. So I'm suggesting as for the good of all, for taking care of this afflicted moon that the virus represents, to maintain a vegetarian diet on Mondays, as well as the new moon and the full moon if you can. And as I said, to dedicate it to the well-being of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be happy, may they be free from disease. May the earth heal, and just make your aspirations along with your sacrifice if you are a meat eater. Okay, I'm switching gears now. That was the spiritual stuff. Now I'm talking about homeopathy. And I have a whole presentation on homeopathy and epidemics that I did about a month ago, but here are some highlights. So this gives you some ideas. This was the Spanish flu of 1918, which was that worldwide pandemic when so many people died. And homeopathy, these are a lot of cases. 24,000 cases of flu that were treated allopathically had a mortality rate of 28.2%. You can see the light pink as to who died. While 26,000 cases of flu treated homeopathically had a mortality rate of 1.05%. So that's a phenomenal difference. And then there was another doctor who treated 26,795 cases of flu with a similar result. So homeopathy can work incredibly well in epidemics, and not just the Spanish flu epidemic, many different kinds of epidemics. Homeopathy has been proven to have really incredible results. So right now we are waiting to find out what the remedy actually is for the coronavirus. I'm going to show you some resources, and it sounds like we might have remedies available or ready in a couple of days, but I'll explain a little bit more about this. So Paul Hirschku is a homeopath, classical homeopath, who's been working on this for, I think, a few decades. Every year he goes through, he collects cases from homeopaths in different places, and we always need to figure out with every new emerging disease what's called the genus epidemicus, or the remedy of the epidemic. Sometimes there are a few remedies, but if you can identify the symptoms that people have in common and figure out what remedy that is, you can actually give it prophylactically to keep from getting sick. But you don't want to take it too early. You don't want to take it until you're actually in the aura or of the epidemic, or it's come to your community. If you take remedies that you don't need, it's not a good idea. So Paul Hirschku in his update, which came out today, said it'll be in a couple of days. So he's basically gathering cases of actual homeopaths who have seen cases of coronavirus and putting all the information together to figure out the remedies. So we're very grateful to Paul Hirschku for this, for his service. And I was mentioning the Rahu aspect of this virus. One of the things that happened, and you'll hear it if you watch my epidemic presentation, is that some homeopaths in Hong Kong were claiming that they had been treating cases and that the main remedy was gelsemium. Well, it turns out, Paul Hirschku reported just a week or so ago that nothing of the sort had happened. They basically took the article that Paul Hirschku had written about the flu and then wrote it as if it was about the coronavirus and put it out, and basically deceived a lot of people. And then he somehow got wind of it and got back to them, and the last thing he wrote about is, I hope this was inaccurate. They haven't seen any cases. We don't know the remedy. I'm absolutely sure the remedy is not gelsemium, which makes sense because the symptoms that I've heard about it, for example, there's no runny nose, it goes directly into the chest. None of that really sounded like a dry cough. The things that we do know about it don't sound like gelsemium. So anyway, in that last presentation, I was going on what these Hong Kong homeopaths had supposedly said, but it turned out to totally be untrue. And that's very Rahu-y very much about the north node of the moon in terms of deception or miscommunication, or I don't know what was going on. But anyway, Paul Hirsch, you said it's not true. I hope he issues a retraction of what he said. I don't know if he ever did, but in any case, I trust Paul Hirsch. You can go and to that website, or you can just be on my mailing list, because I'll be putting out this information as well when it comes out. So these are some of his ideas, because he's actually a naturopath as well as a homeopath. So these are some of his ideas. They're on his blog. Prevention strategies, cut down on alcohol, sugar, refined foods, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, elderberry. And of course, we have to be careful about elderberry, not too much of it because of the cytokine storm if somebody actually gets sick. Mushroom immunity, resveratrol, I thought that was interesting because it might have worked with the other coronavirus. Good rest, stay hydrated, don't panic. And then if you're in a confined space, like if you go on an airplane or something like that, double everything, use zinc propolis lozenges and throat sprays. And then if you're getting some symptoms or you've been exposed, he's suggesting, these stronger kinds of herbs and protocols. And he thinks resveratrol is very important, and then mentions some other herbal kind of stuff to do. So, if you're worried about this, you might want to keep some of these things on hand. So check out his blog, because I think he keeps really up to date on all of this. Oxylococcinum is a homeopathic you might want to keep around. It's very easy to get a hold of. It's made from the livers of ducks in China, which is the reservoir for most of the viral conditions that come into the world. So I think it's always a good thing to take at the beginning of any kind of viral condition, and it does seem to limit the severity and duration of a lot of viral conditions. So it's easy to take. The one recommendation I would have is that they want you to take like a whole tube of it, but really you only need a few pellets. So you can make this last a really long time. It doesn't expire either. So just picking up some oxylococcinum, keeping it around, it's a good idea. I just had a look at this book that somebody was recommending, Herbal Antivirals, Natural Remedies for Emerging and Resistant Viral Infections. The guy who wrote this is wonderful. He also wrote one of my favorite books called Sacred and Healing Beers. He's a really interesting person, does a lot of very detailed research into traditional medicines. And he had like a top 7 of antivirals in this book. You can get it on Amazon. I actually, somebody gave me the PDF of it, so I was going through it yesterday. And I was happy to see that one of his main antivirals was ginger, because ginger is such a wonderful anti-inflammatory, wonderful in so many ways. He says that it needs to be fresh ginger to have this ability to work as an antiviral. So the juice, it takes about 30 minutes after drinking the fresh juice as a hot tea for the ginger's components to enter the bloodstream. They reach peak concentration in about 60 minutes and then begin to decline. So if you have an acute viral condition, you can, and he says specifically respiratory viruses respond very well to ginger. So fresh juice tea should be consumed every 2 to 3 hours in acute conditions or at the onset of colds or flu to keep the constituents at high levels in the blood. So I thought this was great. I love ginger so much for a lot of other reasons. But the fact that it's actually an antiviral. So keeping fresh ginger on hand, I know in some places in the country, you can actually get big things of organic fresh ginger at Costco. They don't have it in my area near Mount Shasta. So whenever I go to the Bay Area, it's one thing I always load up on. I go to Costco and buy a few boxes of the fresh ginger because I love it so much. Especially organic seems to be stronger. So he says juice 1 or more pieces of ginger, in total about the size of a medium to large carrot, or 4 pieces the size of your thumb. Save the plant matter that's over after juicing, or else squeeze it dry, because you can still get more juice out of it. He says if you don't have, because he was actually talking about juicing it. He also said you can just, kind of steep it as well. If you don't have a juicer, just steep it in hot water, and then combine, either steep it in hot water or take the juice, 1/4 cup with 12 ounces of hot water, tablespoon of honey, and 1/4 of a lime squozen. I guess he means squeezed. And 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne, and drink 4 to 6 cups a day. So that was just one of his herbs. A lot of the other herbs like isatis, which is a Chinese herb, licorice was there. Some of them were herbs I wasn't familiar with. But anyway, if you're interested in herbal antivirals, I thought that was a really good resource. The reason we want to be careful about stimulating the immune system with immune stimulating herbs is something called cytokine storm, which can happen when the body is very overwhelmed by an infection and is basically like an autoimmune response. And so this is what a lot of people, they think, died from in the great pandemic of 1917, was basically the body's immune system turning on itself, which leads to multiple organ failure. I'll talk a little bit about hygiene and prevention. I think there's a lot of information out there now. Of course, we all know masks are useless. Wear gloves or hand cleansers. One thing I think we need to think about are public bathrooms. This has come up in some of the reading I've been doing. There are many, many, many viruses and bacteria in public bathrooms. And especially mostly in public bathrooms, there are no lids on the toilet. So when the toilet is flushed, it's just spraying stuff. We don't see it, but it is spraying stuff everywhere, as do those hand drying things also just kind of spread viruses everywhere. So it would be a good idea, if you can, avoid public toilets. That means don't go in there to wash your hands because you think you're doing something good about washing your hands. Would be better just to use hand sanitizer. What I do these days when I'm doing errands, because anything that you touch might have a virus on it, probably does have some kind of virus on it. That includes the shopping cart handles, it includes pumping gas, it includes money. They're talking about it may be transmitted through money. So, if you get if you're not using your cards and you get change, there may be viruses on that. So the main thing is be aware of what you're touching when you're outside of your house, and do not touch your face, because that's how the virus gets in. So you touch your eyes, your ears, your mouth. These are all ways that the virus, once it's gotten on your hands, you actually put it in your body. So you have to just control yourself and not touch your face when you're out when you're out of the house. And whenever you come back into the car or back into your house, use the hand sanitizers. So I'm kind of in a routine now. Like, I mostly leave the house to run errands or something. So I go to the post office, I do my thing, I make sure I'm not touching my face, I get back in the car, I use hand sanitizers before I touch my steering wheel and stuff like that. So that's the best thing to do. Soap is really good, but the hand sanitizer with 60% alcohol, I actually here in Mount Shasta, I went to the dollar store to get a big thing of hand sanitizer because I'm running low. Well, they're completely sold out, even up here where there isn't any known infections. So they did have some some rubbing alcohol and some kind of gel product, like After Sun gel product, which I'm going to just mix with the alcohol and use that, so that I have enough hand sanitizer that I can, if I go out and run errands, I can use that. So that's my suggestion. There's this great website if you want to go on total information overload. This is actually run by, I think, some friends of mine, called germinfo.org. And they just got a grant. I think they did a GoFundMe and got $25,000 or $30,000. You can actually donate to them. They're associated with a nonprofit, and they are finding every little bit of information available and putting it all on their website. And it's very overwhelming. I mean, there are probably 20 or 30 articles a day at least. But it's really good information. So if you want to go on information overload or just browse what they have and see what you're interested in, germinfo.org is a great resource. Lifestyle, these are my own recommendations. Really check your vitamin D levels. Vitamin D has a great effect on your immune system, also on mood. So make sure your vitamin D levels are high. I personally need to take 10,000 IUs a day to stay in a good reference range. So please take care of that. Eat enough protein, regular meals, healthy fats. Mood follows blood sugar, so try not to go on to those wild swings by refined carbs. Breathe, relax, pray, spend time in nature. Spend time away from your devices, do some spiritual practice, prayer, mantra, meditation, etc. Try to take the time, if we do end up having more time because we're not going out and running around and traveling and doing things, these are ideal ways to spend our time. Okay, I don't know. This is something that somebody put up yesterday. He took the phrase "don't panic" as the homeopath was also saying, so he made an acronym from it. Distance yourself socially, avoid going out as much as possible, organize yourself, set up things so you can care for yourself or others. If they become bedridden, no more risky behavior like shaking hands. One of the articles I saw in GermInfo said that a minister at a large church in Washington, D.C. shook the hands of 500 people yesterday and then was diagnosed as positive for coronavirus. And this is after he shook 500 people's hands. So it just doesn't make any sense to be doing those kinds of things right now. Take the time you need to become aware, but not too much. This thing moves fast. Plan ahead, get food and medicine for 2 to 12 weeks as you are able. So I don't know why people are stockpiling toilet paper and water. It's kind of weird, but certainly having food supplies and medicine, things that you're going to need for a couple of weeks if you do end up needing to self-quarantine, then you can relax and just kind of enjoy your time at home. So do try to get the things that you need. Ask your local facilities who house the elderly to take special precautions because of their extreme risk. Notify those who need to be aware of things, where your will is, if you have set up a power of attorney. And these are all things we should be doing anyway that we just don't take care of. So this is a good time to really take care of these details that we always put off. Inform those close to you of best behaviors and practices. Not everyone has time to get up to speed, and contemplate how you will react in multiple eventualities, including if someone close to you falls ill, if you get sick, and if the local health center is overwhelmed. Take into account the pain of social distancing if when a loved one or yourself becomes ill and you need to avoid spreading the virus to high-risk individuals. So, all of our lives are going to be impacted to some extent by what's going on here. So being prepared, being calm about it, helping others, and going forward with a kind of sense of kindness and service to others. I think we all can become better people from this. So I went through some ideas of storage, healing foods to have on hand. Healing fats such as coconut oil, ghee, and olive oil. Healing legumes such as mung beans, chickpeas, lentils, beans. Raw chickpea flour is a great one. It's called basan in the Indian stores. Healing spices such as turmeric, ginger, coriander seed, mustard seed, cumin, fennel, and my favorite, asafoetida. Healing herbs, healing grains, healing nuts, and even seeds for sprouting if it's hard to get fresh veggies. I mean, you can go to the freezer section and stock up on vegetables and keep some veggies, you know, thinking about being at home for 2 or 3 weeks. But you can also get some seeds. Broccoli sprouts are extremely nutritious. I shared this in another recent presentation. This is my kitchery recipe. The first ones are the different herbs that I use in, which are all high in antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, have wonderful healing properties. And then I use 1/3 cup of mung dal, which is split mung beans, quinoa and basmati rice, and then ghee, but you can also use coconut oil. You can also put veggies in it. So what you do is you fry the spices in the oil, then you add the grains and the legumes, and then you add water and you just simmer it. I do mine in an Instapot, but if you're using mung dal, it still will cook in under half an hour. You don't need to do it in an Instapot, but that's a really very nourishing, very soothing, delicious healing food. Garbanzo beans, I'm a fan of. They have a low glycemic index. They are associated with the planet Jupiter, which is very good for the moon. So, and they look like little brains. So they're really a great healing food. And this is a recipe from yumly.com that I recently got, which uses chickpeas and chickpea flour, but it also has 3 cups of spinach and a carrot in it, as well as peanut butter and nutritional yeast, although you could substitute Parmesan cheese if you do dairy. But anyway, this is a very delicious recipe, a way to make a vegetarian meal if you're vegetarian on Mondays or the new and full moons, or if you're in social isolation and want to expand your repertoire of some foods. So as I mentioned, you know, we're all going to die at some point, whether it's soon or tomorrow or tonight or in 20 years or 50 years, we don't know. But we all know that we are going to die. And in the Buddhist tradition, death is considered to be the best opportunity for spiritual liberation. It's the time that we really can liberate ourselves from all of the delusions of samsara. So we can really approach this epidemic as a time to contemplate and face our own fears, our own death, and to cultivate our compassion for others, which is also a way to approach our own death. Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche, in his book, Living is Dying, this is what he really emphasizes in terms of preparation for death, is to develop the bodhicitta, or the compassion about thinking about others first, and saying, I'd really like to come back in another life and really be able to benefit others, and just have that aspiration that we want to help others, and even beyond this life, we want to continue to help others, just as some of the great saints of that tradition have reincarnated again and again and again, such as the 14th Dalai Lama. There were 14 times he's died and come back because he wants to help beings. And we can cultivate that same kind of compassion that goes beyond this life, and just aspire to always be helpful to other beings. So hopefully we can take all of this information from that point of view and understand that, yeah, we are in a certain kind of crisis place in terms of where the world is, and we have things that we can do to make the world a better place and to bring peace and comfort to ourselves and to others as well. So this is the information I wanted to present, and I want to dedicate this presentation to all beings. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be happy. And may we all support each other in kindness, love, and happiness. So just check in and see if anybody has any questions for me at this point. You can unmute, or I can unmute everybody. Let's see, unmute. Does anybody have a question or a comment?
I was gonna say for the fresh ginger, there's this thing called microplanes, and they're very sharp graters.
Mm-hmm.
And when I want to make ginger tea, I always like to use the fresh ginger, and I use that, and it just completely pulps the ginger.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need like a fancy thing to make to juice your ginger to get a lot of the juice out of a ginger.
Great. Okay, good point.
Very sharp grater will do the job.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Suzanne, did you have something you wanted to say? I see you're unmuted.
Yes. So will you be able to re-listen to this, did you say?
Yes, I'm recording it.
So
Yeah.
how do we?
I will, I'll send out the YouTube link to the same email list that I sent
Okay. Okay.
about to my
Great.
email list. So you're welcome to share it with others
Great.
as well. You can do whatever you want with it. I'll put it up on YouTube and you can.
And thank you so much for
You're
this
welcome.
webinar
Yeah.
today. I mean, valuable information.
Great. Well, you're very welcome, and I hope we're all do well through the next upcoming time. All right.
Thank you, Ella. It was wonderful, all this information.
You're welcome, Risa. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for picking up so many different threads and putting them all in one place. That's
Okay,
Yes.
you're welcome. Well, I could probably almost do this every week at the rate that things are going. But what really motivated me was looking at that chart. It was actually yesterday morning. I looked at that. I went back to the presentation that James had done, and I looked at the chart and I said, oh my God, this is looking quite intense. So I just wanted to say my piece about it and hope that it would be valuable for people. So, okay, so be well, happy full moon, and yeah, feel free to share and join my mailing list, and I will keep you posted when the major things come out, especially if hopefully in the next day or two we'll know the homeopathic remedies.
Thank you so much, Willa. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. All right. Bye.
Bye, everybody.